One is it's not a linear path. I mean, it's not like I go from point A to point B to point C to point D. It could be a very zigzag way. And what I mean by that is, again, I go back to the whole interdisciplinary bit of it, saying, hey, it's not necessary that if I'm in.
Welcome everyone to Startup Duniya, showcasing the inspiring journey of startups. This is your host Yasmin Khan, and today I am glad to welcome CEO and founder of GyanDhan, Mr. Ankit Mehra. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Before we start, let me tell you, GyanDhan is India's first education financing marketplace, trying to solve the education financing problem in India. So from this conversation, let's try to understand about GyanDhan and other aspects from Mr. Mehra. So Mr. Mehra, starting with my very first question, that is a very obvious question. We would like to know what is the startup story behind India's first education financing marketplace, GyanDhan.
So as would be common with most startups, it started with a personal story. It started with something we experienced in our own journey. So prior to starting GyanDhan, I was pursuing my MBA from ESA Business School in Barcelona. And when I got an admission to ESA Business School in 2013, I was quite elated because it was one of the top 10 schools, international MBA schools. However, when I was planning for my fees, that's when I realized that getting access to financing was not that easy, because Indian banks were not giving loans to the tune of 1 crore that is required for such a program. And international lenders were also not that eager to give loans to an international student. And so it was a very interesting position I was in, wherein I had a lot of colleagues of mine who were from not so well of backgrounds. They had gotten admission into one of the top 10 schools. They had great academic backgrounds of their own, didn't have a means to pay for their education. And that just didn't sound right to me. Prior to getting into the business school, I was working with Capital One in the US, where we were in the business of identifying, doing risk-based pricing. So really understanding what is the future income of certain individuals, how can they or he or she repay their loans. And that is what triggered the thought process in my mind that, hey, if someone is coming from an average background, but he or she has great academic credentials and their future prospects are very bright, there should be a way to provide them adequate financing so that they can pay for their education. So that is what triggered the idea of GyanDhan for me. My co-founder Jainesh also has had his own experiences. So prior to getting into IIT, Jainesh was a product of Super 30 that a lot of folks might be aware of. And Jainesh always had the idea of doing something like Super 30 but at scale. And that's where our own experiences came together, and we said, hey, there has to be a better way of doing education loans in India rather than just saying, hey, how much money does your parent earn and do you have a property to get a loan? So it was really trying to say, hey, can you bring meritocracy in the system? Can you really do some kind of a risk-based pricing? And that was the genesis behind GyanDhan. As far as the marketplace is concerned, what we felt was that we could work with existing lenders. So rather than creating a completely new entity of our own, we could actually enable the existing lenders, the big banks and the NBFCs to make better decisions to help the final consumer. And with that in mind, we moved to 2015 to start GyanDhan.
Okay, quite interesting. Now I would like to know about your products. If anyone is very new to GyanDhan, and in a very simple word, how can we explain them about the product, the tools, and the market segments of GyanDhan?
Sure. So at a very high level, what happens is a student who is interested in pursuing higher education, then come to our platform. And what we'll do is we'll identify, given their profile, what is the best fit for them. So think of it as you might go to an Amazon and you want a pen and you'll search for a pen. Similarly, you'll say, hey, I want to go abroad for higher studies. We'll take your basic requirements into consideration. So we'll take all the filters saying, hey, what is your academic background? What kind of loan do you want? What amount do you want? And take all those parameters into consideration and then figure out, hey, can lender A or lender B do a loan for you? And then figure out which is the best possible partner for you and help you get the loan from that particular lender. So really, it's just like a marketplace. I mean, similar to how you go to an Amazon or some other e-commerce website. You come to GyanDhan, you would figure out, hey, these are my requirements. You give us your list of requirements, and we'll find out which is the best product. So GyanDhan recommends product kind of a thing. Uh, Now, where do we operate? So we started off with the focus on students going abroad for higher education, and that's the segment we've been operating for the last 6 years now. Early last year, we had also started another vertical, which is growing at a fairly rapid pace for us, which is ensuring that students who are looking for doing part-time courses or doing upskilling courses through your online players or offline players in India can now apply for loans through the GAMIN program. So there what happens is, let's say we have onboarded a partner, Institute A, in our platform. Now, all the students who are going to attend a course from the Institute A can come to GyanDhan to ensure that their course fees is funded through GyanDhan.
Fantastic. Now, like easily, I also understood, and even students who are watching this are really clarified. Thank you for that. Moving to my next question. In one of your podcast interview, I have like these figures. It was like only 28% of the population of 18 to 28, 23 age group enrolled in higher education. So, you have answered there, but in a very simple way. Walk us through this and explain the problem in that market.
Sure. So the 28% odd number that you're referring to is actually what we call the GER, the gross enrollment ratio. So how that is defined is how many students in that age group are actually enrolled in higher education, and the denominator is what is the total number of population that is in that age group. Now the issue with that is, and just clarification, for India the number is close to 28% compared to 70% odd for many developed countries, and so there is definitely a stark difference there. Having said that, there are two drivers basically that is ensuring that the number is fairly low. The key driver really is the ratio of eligible population. What I mean by that is, let's say if you're talking as the denominator as total students who are in that age group, but what we really need to look at is how many of them are even eligible to be in that higher education segment. So what I mean by that is, let's say if someone who has not even completed the secondary education or primary education by the age group of 16, 17, they will definitely not be eligible for a higher education when they turn 18. So the underlying problem is the fact that primary education success metrics themselves are not fairly robust. There aren't many people who are graduating out of that group at a high pace. And so what we have seen is of late, folks have been proposing something called an eligibility employment ratio, which is essentially, hey, let's not consider the total population that is in that segment, but let's just consider people who are actually eligible to even apply for higher education. And if you look at that metric is closer to 65%. Now that number sounds high, but again, if I were to compare it to other countries, yes, we are at par with, let's say, a UK, but we are definitely still much lower than China at 73% or France at 76%, and countries like Germany and US are consistently above 90%. So there is still a lot of room for gap there, and that's the kind of bridge between 60 odd to 90 odd is really down to the fact that access to financing is a big issue. People don't have the understanding of what is the outcome going to be. Is it really worth going for that higher education also? There are multiple other parameters that fall into play. So to summarize, I think there are two clear-cut differentiators at the very high level. One of the things is definitely the lack of success of the primary education system itself. And the second thing is, hey, even if I was eligible, then do I actually have the means? And by means, I say I have the financial support to actually enroll myself into higher education.
Yeah, well said. And these are the major issues when we were as a student. We also face that, and sometimes the thing is like students are not even aware. Like, what kind of higher
Yeah.
education is?
So you're very right in that because even till date, when we talk to students who are graduating from college, they tell us that they are not pursuing higher education because they don't even know whether they will have access to financing. So lack of awareness is very, very key even at this point.
Now we would like to know some tips on education loans. Like, oh, what must a student do? What are the
Mhm.
tricks of trade for any student who is going to apply for masters?
Sure. So at this point in time, the simplest trick would be if you're planning to go for masters abroad, you come to GyanDhan. Uh, but I will make it more generic and talk about what should students be looking at because we are still not actively in the Indian domestic market. But I'll broadly talk about what should really students look at when they're applying for education. So typically what happens is the first thing people need to understand is in most of the cases, you would need a co-applicant to apply for an education loan. So you would be applying for an education loan and one of your parents will be a co-applicant in that loan in most of the cases. Now, what we need to understand is what do the banks really look for when they're approving or NBFCs look for when they're approving an education. The first thing you need to be very clear about is you need to have a good credit score. Now, what does a credit score really mean? Is it really is a reflector of have you been repaying your debts or not, and that is applicable both for you and your client. So what I mean by that is these days now we have a lot of fintech companies offering short-term loans or zero EMI loans to students as well. What students need to ensure is that they are actually making the payments on time. Because if you've not made your payments on time on these loans, that gets reflected to your bureau. And as a lender, if you have not been repaying debts in the past, that is a very clear-cut indicator that will probably be a risk of default in the future. The most important thing is ensuring that you have a good credit score. And that comes from the fact that you have been repaying your debts on time. So both for you and your co-applicant, that is the most important thing that you need to keep in mind. After that, there are multiple other things. One is obviously the fact that, hey, do you have the right documents in place? And what I mean by that is one is what are the list of documents that are required? You need to understand that and be prepared as early as possible. So let's say if you're looking at a loan without collateral, in that case, the list of documents is fairly short and fairly easy to get. You will have your Aadhaar cards or PAN cards and other bank statement documents and so on and so forth. But when it comes to a loan against collateral, that's where the property documents are very, very critical. What ends up happening, what we see regularly is students wait for the loan application till much further into their journey. And when they come with a list of documents, we realize that certain documents are missing. And then it's really a race against the clock because you're planning to go for higher studies. You are targeting, hey, in the next 15 days I'll get my loan. But if a basic document itself is missing and you need to get a duplicate document done, then it's a fairly challenging task. So I would say prepare the list of documents as well much in advance. Talk to GyanDhan or any other platform that can help you kind of figure out what are the right set of documents. I think from a preparation standpoint, I think these are the two key things I'll say. Then the other thing people need to realize in terms of the education loan is what is the product that you want. And what I mean by that is whether you want a secured product or an unsecured product. Obviously, people would want to go for an unsecured product. You don't want to necessarily pledge your parents' property to get a loan. But what you need to realize is that interest rates on an unsecured loan are much higher than what you would get if you were applying for a secured loan. So people need to weigh that effectively to make a decision. Hey, is a secured loan actually better for me? Can I actually go for a secured loan itself? That's the first thing that they need to understand. And the second thing that they also need to be cautious about is education loans, if taken, can be very good from a tax planning perspective as well. You get tax benefits under Section 80 if you get a loan from a bank. So really identifying here which are the right set of lenders who provide me with the Section 80 benefit can actually help your applicant in their tax filing significantly. So I think these are the kind of things people need to look for. One other caveat that I'll throw out for students is as part of the general research, they should also look at the hidden costs. So some of the lenders might have some hidden costs or delays in their processing,
Right.
which can impact students at the very top.
Yeah. Now, like extending this question, if a student wants to approach GyanDhan, so from start to the end, how will be the process for a student?
So typically the way, as I was telling at the start, typically the way it works is students fill what is called a loan eligibility form on our website. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
there was effectively a profile of theirs, with which we use to map them to a particular lender. So that is effectively a 5-minute form that they'll have to fill, and they'll get a results saying, here you are
Mm-hmm.
eligible for a loan or you're not eligible for a loan. And then if you're eligible for a loan, what are the next steps? Now, once we have identified a particular partner, one of our executives typically gets in touch with the student and explains or answers any other questions that they might have before starting their process with the partner. Now, if it's an unsecured loan, then it typically takes somewhere around a week to get a loan done. If it's a secured loan, then the property evaluation does take time. In those cases, the loan application could take anywhere between 2 to 3 months. So that is really typically how the process works. Now, in the domestic business, and that is what we'll eventually move the study abroad segment to as well in the next 1 year. In the domestic space, it's actually a completely digital journey, which is done completely end to end without any manual intervention. So there, what happens is, if you're applying for an institute A, which is paneled with us, you will go to our website, you will go through you will submit the documents digitally. So you will do your PAN verification, your Aadhaar verification, your bank account submission. And at the end of it all, you'll just have to sign a loan agreement and set up your mandates to ensure that we can collect EMIs. So the entire process happens without intervention of any executive or any employee. So that's a completely self-service journey. Having said that, if folks need assistance, there are people who can help them in the different steps of the journey.
Yeah.
So that journey in itself will effectively mean that right from the starting of the application to the point in time when you are assured
Hmm.
of a loan, it's effectively a 10-minute journey at worst.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for that. And students watching this, and I hope if you have any kind of query, you can obviously reach to GyanDhan at any time. So yeah, you can do that, and start your journey with GyanDhan. I would like to know how is the market segment now of GyanDhan? Like how many students have been helped by GyanDhan? What are your future plans for them, and many more.
Sure. So since inception, we have done over 1,500 crores in loans through our marketplace now, of which almost 500 crores loans have been done this financial year itself. Um, at this point in time, we get close to 1 lakh applications in the study abroad space on an annual basis. So in terms of the kind of reach, we are actually pretty recently we've captured the market. And increasingly, because of our performance, we do get a lot of referral volumes from the students because students see the value as against, let's say, 6 years ago when we started, there was a question of why is it that, what is the merit of GyanDhan? Now students see the value and then they become our ambassadors, so to speak. When they'll tell their juniors or they'll tell their friends, say, you should probably reach out to GyanDhan to get. So I think that is really, in terms of the volumes, I've already shared the numbers. Going ahead, we actually think that this is actually just barely scratching the surface, because when we look at just the study abroad itself as a segment, it's actually a $30 billion spend on an annual basis. And we feel that realistically, almost 10 billion of that must be funded by lenders. So if I compare 500 crores to $10 billion, that's really peanuts. So we definitely think that there's a lot of room for improvements, both on the process part as well as the product part. And that is what our focus will be, trying to build new products with our partners to ensure that the student needs are met. Because if I look at it overall, the challenges that we figured out in the industry was, at times there were products that were developed which had no use case. So if I give an example, let's say if I'm going to Harvard for an MBA, typically I would need a loan of almost a crore and a half. All the best banks and lenders in India were actually offering loans only up to 30, 40 lakhs. that doesn't really meet my requirement as a student. So the key thing is building the right product for the right segment, and then ensuring that that is kind of fulfilled in the best possible time. So rather than kind of making it a probabilistic thing, making it deterministic for the student. The student knows for a fact that, hey, I'll get my loan in certain ways. So that is the journey we are on. Uh, as I said, in the study in the domestic segment as well, we started last year. There we
Yeah.
see tremendous amount of growth, and we see all the movement from the online to the from the offline to the online segment
Online.
being a big driver in terms of requirement for loans and so on and so forth. So that's the other segment we are very kind of excited about. And we think there is a lot of room for product innovation in that space as well. So in the next couple year or so, we will see a lot of new products being rolled out by GyanDhan, which will be catering to both these segments.
Yeah. So wishing all the luck for your journey. And moving to my next question, that will be the second last question of the session. Like, what do you think about the Indian education? And do you feel Indian education make any student ready for facing the world? And also, as we are MSMEs, like voice of MSMEs, developing entrepreneurship. So, do you think Indian education develop entrepreneurship skills in any student? What are your thoughts?
Okay. So I'll touch the employability part first. Obviously, there are multiple reports around employability of Indian grads and so on and so forth. I think numbers would vary from 30% to 50% of the people being employable, depending on which reports you're referring to. So the numbers are fairly sobering. It definitely talks about that there is a lot of need for kind of improvement in the education system itself, or the way education is being delivered. Because nowadays you see a lot of tech startups actually um, crop up, which are essentially acting as finishing school. So what's happened now is you're essentially going through this entire 4-year engineering degree as an example, and then you are again going enrolling into another program which is effectively making you industry ready, which really brings into question what was the purpose of this 4 years of education itself. So that's definitely a question around, uh, is there kind of a need for change or a complete overhaul of the education system or not? My limited view is that uh, there are a lot of institutes that are doing a really great job, both government and private institutes, more recently, who are actually trying to impart the necessary skills to the students. And here I'm reminded of one of our professors back from IIT Kanpur days who used to say that, hey, I mean, it's not really necessarily a case of uh, ensuring that people get a job getting out of college, but the purpose of a college life is really to equip you with the skill sets so that you can find your path. And I think that is what is missing more than anything else. And that is why it's kind of reflect when I reflect back on my IT days, I think the whole interdisciplinary thing of teaching different things other than just engineering helps a student in a well-rounded growth. So, I mean, to summarize, I think there is definitely a lot of difference between what's being taught in colleges versus what is being required by the industry, and that definitely needs to happen. But at the same point in time, I don't think we need to measure universities or colleges just from a yardstick of how many people are getting employed. But it's really should be, are they employable?
So very well said, sir. It's really you said right. Like students are employable. We really need some skills when a fresher gets out of the college and face the real world. That's where we understand like what was taught in college and what is the real world is really a very different scenarios that I have also experienced. So that was my favorite question. I wanted to know from you, like, I am the only one who thinks like that, or is this the real thing? So moving to my last question of the session, that is, I always ask our guest, what are what are your message or your advice to your audience watching our interview? in aspects of the career growth and even in aspects of the life.
So I think, um, to be honest, I'm at the start of my career as well, so I'm not really that experienced. But whatever my limited experience has been, I think it's what I can, what I've been able to glean is, one is it's not a linear path. I mean, it's not like I go from point A to point B to point C to point D. It could be a very zigzag way. And what I mean by that is, again, I'll go back to the whole interdisciplinary bit of it, saying, hey, it's not necessary that if I'm in, let's say, if I'm a software engineer, I just need to focus on the MERN stack, or I just need to focus on a specific uh, coding language and kind of get into the depths of it. Or let's say if I am a finance guy, hey, now I need to do a CFA, and this is how life is. I think that is a very narrow view of things. I think a better approach would be a finance guy who's also uh, actually, let me give an example, because I was looking at a video yesterday, and that springs to my mind. It was about biomimicry, which talks about, hey, uh, in the 70s or so, the fast high-speed trains in Japan had an issue around when they were coming out of tunnel. There used to be a supersonic boom, and the way that problem was solved was they actually, the person in charge was actually a bird watcher. So he looked at how birds move around in the atmosphere, and he tried to mimic the uh, anatomy of birds to kind of reorient the or redesign the machines. And that's how they were able to solve for that problem of supersonic booms. So I think that is where I would say talk about, it's not necessarily a linear thing that, hey, this, but it could be trying to gain experiences from different parts and then trying to synthesize that all together. So be open to all kinds of experiences. It'll work, they say connecting the dots, it'll kind of connect at some point in time.
Like, so you are advising everyone to be multi-talented, and that's the motto of your life. I can say that.
Yeah. I mean, I think yeah, it's another thing that I've learned, or I kind of uh, I would say echo with, is the whole concept of strengths finder. That probably you should probably be really good at one particular thing, and that should be your strongest suit. But outside of that, you don't need to be a jack of. You don't need to really be the master in 20
But,
different things. You need to
hmm,
have interact with people
correct.
necessarily who are good at 20 different things, because that will help you.
Yeah, and I really like this one, being multi-talented, a really unique message. So with this, that is it. Uh, Firstly, thank you so much for your time and this chat. I hope you like the
Thanks
session.
for thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, guys, you can check this interview at all our social media platforms of SMEVenture, that is Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, on YouTube. So, please do like, share, subscribe SMEVenture for more such videos. Again, thanking Mr. Mehra. So, this is your host, Yasmin Khan, signing out. Thank you.